Hi everyone, my name is Hikiko, and I'm a huge Silent Hill fan. As a matter of fact, it's my favorite horror video game franchise of all time. Over the years, I've learned that the series is dead and it's never coming back. But no matter how many times I try to heal these wounds, every few months, a new rumor about a Silent Hill revival shows up out of nowhere to give me hope, only to dash it again. As a matter of fact, while I was making this video, this was born. I don't believe it! Please stop! Well, I admit it. You got me. I'm all out of hope. I'm all out of soul. You've crushed every last dream I've had for that franchise. So you can stop now. Please stop. We're now entering a new wave of developers, those that grew up playing the survival horror classics like Silent Hill and are now making their own. Some have been accusing the medium of being a derivative work, and this was caused by all the parallels drawn to Silent Hill that came after the initial reveal trailer, which the developers did not go out of their way to deny the comparisons, and in some cases outright invited the comparisons by waving the flag of Akira Yamaoka in the reveal trailer.
Hi, hope you enjoyed the reveal of The Medium, our next-gen psychological horror game. We're very excited to announce that we're working on the project in cooperation with Akira Yamaoka, the legendary composer best known for the Silent Hill series.
My expectations for the game were mounting, and I was just desperate for Silent Hill in any form. I didn't care who made it, I just wanted to see someone try to pick up the rusty mantle. And besides, Konami's sure not gonna do it. Polish developer Bloober Team, who brought you Observer, Layers of Fear, and the Blair Witch Project, were behind the medium. It was clear from the start that they were fans of Silent Hill 2, which they brought up time and time again during interviews.
We, of course, are especially fans of Silent Hill 2.
And what was most important for us, it was his work on Silent Hill 2. Because Silent Hill 2, for most of our team, is the best horror game ever, and it's one of our main references when we think about atmosphere in the medium.
Yeah, for me, Silent Hill 2 is one of the best games ever made. Yes. Because of its great atmosphere, music, and story.
Did you draw inspiration from Silent Hill in terms of gameplay, or?
Yeah, mostly I think atmosphere, vibe. You will feel that we really love Silent Hill.
From the very beginning of the project, we've got like a mission statement saying that we want to create a serious adventure game with Silent Hill's atmosphere.
Yeah.
And we did it, I think. So you can, of course, expect, similarities to Silent Hill.
What can I say, Bloober Team? You made your rust-covered bed, now you gotta lie down in it with the Silent Hill community. Here's a little tip. We don't like to share the blanket, and we've got a horrible case of sleep apnea. Night-night. The medium is set in late 90s Poland and stars Marianne, a young woman that has been experiencing a recurring nightmare where she sees a young girl being murdered by a mysterious man in the woods at night. Marianne's story begins on a rather bleak note. She works at her foster father Jack's funeral home, and the game begins on the day of his death. We explore his apartment for the purposes of front-loading the game with a large amount of expository objects to interact with and to help us catch up to this exact moment in Marianne's life.
Weird to be back in my old room. So many memories.
In a nutshell, Marianne was born with mysterious supernatural powers, and she was adopted by Jack after her parents died. Growing up, she was bullied for being creepy powers girl, and now she has to say goodbye to the only person that ever accepted her for who she was. It's a depressing form of stage setting, but everything you learned here plays into the bigger picture of the game. For example, we get our first glimpse at the game's most advertised feature, feature, the parallel reality system. Essentially, it's two dimensions rendered simultaneously on screen, and our protagonist occupies both the material world and the spirit world as a medium. In layman's terms, it's a person that can communicate with the dead that often have unresolved problems that's preventing them from passing into the great beyond. Mary Ann uses her powers to help the spirits that are trapped in the spiritual realm by solving their problems and putting their souls to rest. Who she really is and where she got her powers are unknown to her. That is, until she receives a phone call from a strange man known as Thomas. He tells her that he knows what she is and has the answers to her fragmented past that she's been looking for. He tells her to meet her at the Neva Hotel, which is this abandoned resort in the middle of the woods that was rumored to be the site of a mass murder. So Mary Ann sets off for Neva and the adventure begins. Alright, before I lay out my criticisms of the medium, I want to compliment Bloober Team. Their level design is top-notch. They nailed the decaying landscapes drenched in fog and setting a foreboding atmosphere in general, and it goes without saying, but hiring Akira Yamaoka was the perfect fit for this kind of game. You'd be hard-pressed to find anyone who better understands how to create dreadful soundscapes that put your mind in a state of isolation while at the same time giving life to the environment through sound. The further I played into the medium, the more I appreciated how much artistry went into designing not only the abandoned resort and surrounding forest, but then redesigning the same area for the spiritual realm. Although the medium is a relatively short game with a sparse map to explore, each room felt distinct from one another, and all had a story to tell.
This was yours, wasn't it, Bernard? It's about time you got it back.
The dual reality system on paper sounded like a good idea, but it comes off as half-baked and ultimately distracting in the implementation. Mary Ann gets an ability where she can temporarily split off into the spiritual realm, so her spirit self can go throw a switch or find a key, but her material self is left stationary, still taking up a portion of the screen. Take for instance how she's just standing here in this dark elevator. Is this really necessary? Can't I just have the full screen while I'm exploring the spiritual realm? Later on, there are moments where the game designates a dimensional shift over to just one of the realms, and it's so much better because you get a dedicated world for your attention. They end up becoming some of the most immersive moments that the game provides, which only solidified my position that the split realm mechanic was more of a gimmick than it was a feature. I do think the split world mechanic works better in cutscenes. Here, you're tasked with spotting the difference between the two realms, which can be fun, but sometimes silly, because if you look over at the material realm, you might notice how Mary Ann is just talking to herself in an empty room. If you're gonna copy your homework from Silent Hill, then don't split up your audience's attention. Choose a dimension and commit to it. The most compromising element to getting immersed within the medium comes from Mary Ann's case of verbal diarrhea. She cannot resist commenting on every little action you take, giving you a solution to a puzzle, an expository dump, a sarcastic quip. Just give it a rest. Cut out like half of Mary Ann's lines and let the player have a moment of contemplation. Let them get wrapped up in this atmosphere you spent all this time building. Look at what happens when I get these bolt cutters.
Yes! Fucking finally. Time to get back to the day room.
What a production! I get this loud achievement notification. Mary Ann then tells me I have to use the bolt cutters on the door to the day room. Then I get an objective notification off to the right to tell me to then go to the day room. There's a constant need in this game to fill silence with commentary and achievement notifications. It takes me out of the moment in a bad way.
was definitely something. Trust me, you made the right call sending me. Yes. It's only a matter of time.
These bolt cutter quips and Napoleon Dynamite references do not belong in a game that's set in late 90s Poland on the site of a horrific massacre.
Kinda sounds like a spy name. Cutters. Bolt cutters.
I was shocked and disturbed by the lack of violence in the medium. It is one of the most sanitized horror games that I've ever experienced in this genre. They are so afraid of disturbing the player that I feel with a few dialogue changes here and there, this game could have easily been rated T for teen. It's not exactly something I'm looking for in my psychological horror experience. The medium tries to handle the heavy subject matters of war, genocide, child abuse, and mental health in its narrative, but often will cut away from any graphic scene that would depict these horrific situations for the player to witness. Besides, cutting away is a brilliant strategy. For one, it's a lot cheaper because you don't have to animate anything additional, and two, you don't have to risk offending anyone because you didn't make a bold choice in showing anything graphic. Speaking of cost-cutting measures, I guess it's a lot easier just to have the player stumble upon a whole bunch of notes that tell the story for you instead of having the player participate in it. I should also mention the echoes, which make you rotate a 3D model in search of a ghost vagina, which acts as the game's audio logs. Oh, and then there are the memory fragments, which are basically another form of echoes, but this time with ghostly figures acting out a scene frozen in time.
Oh, look at this mess. Don't worry, I'll clean you up in no time.
The notes, the echoes, and the memory fragments all exist to serve the same purpose. Let's tell the story that happened right before you got here. We're on the site of this horrific massacre. Blood and bodies abound. But you're just gonna have to take my word for it. It was really disturbing, but I can't show you any of that. You just missed it. The only constant threat to Marianne throughout the game is a winged giant known as the Maw, which can pursue her in both the material world and the spiritual realm. These encounters often boil down to run for your life or stealth past the Maw until you're safe again.
I'll eat you up, just like the others. All of my little friends. No more tea party for.
Sadly, all the Maw encounters are as scripted as they come, and as a consequence, predictable. They're often placed near the chapter end or just after solving a major puzzle. It's a shame because I think the Maw is one of the best things they have going here. I loved how they were building it up to be this horrific monster with a large body count to their name. But all this work that they do to build up the terror behind the Maw comes without a payoff. Oh, unless you count the underwhelming showdown at the end with the beast that amounts to throwing a switch and then going on about your business. I wish I was joking. The sad truth is, all the game's threats are introduced and resolved within the confines of the cutscenes, with minimal player influence in between due to foregoing a combat system. This choice prioritizes the story and atmosphere without introducing the barrier of skill that would prevent some players from seeing the end of the game. It is focused on telling its story and getting as many players as possible to the end, even if it means forcefully grabbing their hands sometimes and guiding them there. The Western-developed Silent Hill Shattered Memories also took this approach by removing combat and replacing it with more exploration and the occasional chase sequence segmented throughout the game. Though this deviation from the norm caught the ire from many longtime Silent Hill fans, but personally, I thought it was a clever attempt to play to the strengths of Silent Hill. I've seen it 100 times. When combat in a horror game goes wrong, it typically goes really wrong, and it could potentially jeopardize the whole production. See my review of Remothered 2 if you need a reminder. The downside to having no combat at all is the linear outcome and lack of a challenge placed upon the player, essentially leaving all players with a similar experience by the end. It also gives little reason to return to the game in the future, and this is especially true if your game commits to a singular ending, which the medium does, and that tells the players of your story-focused game that their choices held no bearing on the outcome. I would be more receptive of the medium's linear story and no combat nature if the marketing did not go out of its way to conflate itself with being like Silent Hill, when in reality, it's a diet Silent Hill experience at best. The truth is, the further I played into the medium, the more I understood that they were two separate entities. About halfway through, the game really comes into its own. The story shifts over to a completely different character that I will leave unnamed. The scene leading up to this shift is one of the most disturbing and effective bits of storytelling contained within, but I will avoid spoiling any further.
This cancer has spread far enough. Time to cut it out.
They drop this character into a desolate landscape of tentacles and giant arms reaching out from the abyss. It's a complete tonal shift into Lovecraftian horror, but I'm not complaining. Also, the tentacles here can attack the character, but he's not defenseless. He actually has a magical barrier to parry their attacks and then defeat them. Wait a minute, we're halfway through the game and they just introduced gameplay? Alright, I love it now. Jokes aside, these environments are the best the game offers and act in true psychological horror fashion as abstract representations of the psyche of a madman that you get to venture through as interesting things happen. The pace here is fast, the story is at its most focused without splitting into two, and the spectacles take the dreadful atmosphere to new heights. By the end of these segments, I was sitting there left wanting to return back to them. I wanted more of this and less of this. There are some obvious choices made here to dilute the whole psychological horror game experience into a digestible product which could be consumed by most players in a single playthrough. Story elements are spelled out for the player in great detail. Characters have clear motivations for their actions, and their struggles are relatable. Puzzles are rarely cryptic and often solved for you. You're in and out in about 7 hours of playtime, which is a perfect amount of time for a horror game. It's clear that they had a wider market in mind for this game, and I do not fault a new IP for trying to lay a simple foundation to build off of. That's fine, but I do acknowledge that Bloober tried to court a fan base with an appetite for a particular kind of game. So, Bloober cannot be upset when some of that fan base walk away from the medium not entirely satisfied by this simple meal. By the way, Bloober outright asked for opinions on the medium, so that's exactly what I'm giving them. Now, despite all of this, do I still recommend the medium? The answer is, yeah, it's actually pretty good. Now, I may be on the shorter side and it's completely simple in what it's trying to deliver here, but that's not always a bad thing. I think it is important to drive more interest towards this genre. Sure, we have entry-level experiences every once in a while, but I think that lifts all boats in the end. People who play this might want to go back and play Silent Hill, and that's never a bad thing. Now, I feel the best aspects of the medium are the deviations from Silent Hill when they try to come into their own. That stuff is the best stuff. When they completely break away from trying to be the revival of Silent Hill, that's when they're at their strongest. I think if they do continue this series, They want to cut that association and play to their strengths. Even though I wasn't a huge fan of the split dimension thing, that's what you got going for you. Play with that, improve that, and then also don't be afraid to break a few eggs. Show me something bloody, something gory. Push a boundary or two, and then you'll be right at home here in the Psychological Horror Fan Club.
Dad?
Hey there, champ.
Are you going away again?
Daddy has to go to work. Once I get back, I can go fishing. You'd like that, wouldn't you?
Hey everyone, my name is Hikiko. Thanks for watching the video today. If you liked what you saw, please consider subscribing, supporting on Patreon, giving me a thumbs up also helps out a lot too. I left a playlist up top of my Deadly Premonition retrospective. If you want to know about why it's one of the survival horror greats, then check out my feature-length videos on the subject. See y'all next time.